shall teach them diligently, diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, sit in your house.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, guys.
Hi. Hi, children. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Sunday school lesson. Over the past few months, we've gone through 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel, 1 Kings and 2 Kings, and today is our last lesson in 2 Kings. So I wanted to take some time to review of how we got here. If you remember a few months ago in Sunday school, in 1 Samuel, Israel was led and judged by the judges, but in 1 Samuel 8, Israel pleaded with Samuel to appoint a king, just like the other nations had. Do you remember who that first king was? Did someone say Saul? That's right. It was Saul. And then after Saul came King David and Solomon and Rehoboam. And then the nation of Israel was divided into a northern and southern kingdom, with Israel in the north and Judah in the south. And some of those kings that led those different areas, some of them loved God and obeyed God, and some of them were far from God and completely disobeyed and, worshiped idols instead. And last week, we learned about King Hezekiah. If you remember, he was the king of the southern kingdom, Judah, and he desired to obey the Lord. He turned to the Lord in prayer and just took all of his worries to the Lord. And today we are going to learn about Hezekiah's son Manasseh, which comes from 2 Kings chapter 21. So here's Sarah, and she's going to tell us about King Manasseh.
Okay, so Manasseh was the king after Hezekiah, but unlike Hezekiah, he did a really, really bad job of being king. So even though he knew of God and his promises, he didn't trust them, and so he started believing in false idols. Now, when you believe in false idols, we call that idolatry. And so idolatry is a sin that God really hates. And this idolatry, you could say that it was irrational, it was useless, rebellious, faithless, evil, and destructive. And it was also foolish because Israel had already gotten in trouble for this exact sin. Now, because of these false idols, Manasseh started doing some really crazy stuff. He started doing witchcraft, he started sacrificing children, and he even brought idols into God's own temple. And because of these crazy things and whatnot, and that God hated it, Manasseh still refused to acknowledge God. And these false idols couldn't even give him what he wanted because they just didn't exist. They weren't real. And so because of all of that and doing things that God hated, he actually made God very angry. And so he brought on punishments for Judah.
Wow. Manasseh was a very evil king who led Judah to sin. And God promised that Israel will suffer consequences if they didn't follow God as the one and only God. And he was going to do that by destroying them using foreign nations. Babylon was a huge nation at that time with Nebuchadnezzar as king. And Nebuchadnezzar attacked Egypt and then later the same year invaded Judah, taking some of the Jewish nobility, including Daniel and his friends. God was sovereign, using nations around Israel to accomplish his purpose. And God always does what he said he will do. He is just, giving punishment that was deserved. After many different evil kings of Judah, Jehoiakim was 18 years old when he became king. And then in 597 BC, Jehoiachin, king of Judah, surrendered to Nebuchadnezzar, who took 10,000 official soldiers and craftsmen to Babylon, leaving just the poorest people behind. Judah had rejected the temple where the Lord promised King Solomon to be present with them. And so now the Lord was stripping away all the glories of that temple. During this time, Jerusalem suffered extreme misery and was exactly what the Lord said would happen if Israel didn't cling to him. Jerusalem was captured, and many temple and buildings were burned down, and even the city walls were torn down. As we can see, God punishes evil. But he is very patient, giving many opportunities to repent and forgiving those who do. But his patience eventually comes to an end when it is too late to repent, when God punishes evil with great wrath.
Wow, God really hates and punished Judah's sin. But guys, I have some really good news to tell you. After several chapters of sin and sadness, there is a glimpse of hope, and it's really exciting news. So around 561 BC, a long time ago, after Jehoiakim, the guy Nathan just talked about, who surrendered to Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar took everything from him, well, he was in prison for 37 long years. And then he was released from prison, and he was honored above all the kings of Babylon. Every day of his life, he ate at the table of the king. That's crazy. But that is not even the good news that I was talking about. The reason why this is so important is because this means that God's promise to David is unbroken. You remember David. You guys learned about him a bit ago. He was that good king who loved God. Do you remember what God promised David? Yeah, God promised David that he was going to establish his kingdom and bring out the Messiah out of David's family. And that is why God showed grace to Jehoiakim and let him out of prison. So this means that David's dynasty has survived the curse of the exile, and there is still hope. And this hope is realized in Jesus Christ. As a descendant of Jehoiakim, Jesus is the true son of David. Wow. God was faithful to David and kept his promises to him. Isn't that amazing? But even that is not the good news that I was talking about. God's judgment against Judah proves that mankind is thoroughly sinful. It shows God hates sin and punishes sin, especially the sin of those who claim to be God's people but do not follow him. But there is hope. Through Jehoiakim, the Messiah Jesus Christ came, and he bore God's righteous wrath against sin. And because of that, whoever believes in Jesus Christ is forgiven, and that has been given a new heart, a heart of obedience. And that's the good news that I wanted to tell you about.
Well, in our next lesson, we're going to see this good news sent out to Nineveh. So we'll see you next week for the story of Jonah.
Diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way.